So, I think we can all admit it's fairly obvious by this point who the actual culprit is. I mean, come on, right? Without going into that, however. One of the things I find most amusing about what Ahsoka's doing throughout this episode is that it's everything that Anakin has trained her to do. That the system didn't work, so, well, she's going to do it on her own. Now, again, I want you to keep that in mind because next episode's where that really comes to a head. But for the moment, I want you to remember those, especially since it is Anakin himself who points out her strategy. She is running in order to prove her innocence. She needs to go and find the proof, and they won't let her do that, and they won't believe her from a jail cell, and, well, then we'll make it work. Now, one of the things I notice is, as I pointed out last time, the rift between Anakin and the Council is getting wider and wider as the Council freely admits they think she's guilty. And Plo Koon and... is it Plo Koon? Oh, shoot. I always get them confused. Hang on a second. Plo Koon. I'm right. Plo Koon and Anakin are the only two who even harbor doubts as to whether or not she is actually guilty. Now, actually, for the record, I think firmly that Anakin at no point thinks she is actually guilty. Not even a little. Rather, I think he has, of course, been put into the position of basically having to prove his loyalty to the Council, which is utter bullcrap. I mean, you notice that, right? The Council playing politics on this one, assigning Plo Koon and Anakin to hunt down Ahsoka. Come on. One of the things I noticed, though, again, keeping in line with this descent of Anakin and the fact that, the wedge between him and the Council is increasing, you'll notice the one and only person who spoke in favor of Anakin and said he shouldn't be taken off the case is Obi-Wan. Someone who, I feel like pointing out, has been absent this entire time. You'll notice he's there via hologram, which is why he hasn't really been part of this story. I think that's very relevant, because I'm pretty sure Obi-Wan would be... Well, let's just say he's a little bit better at the political side of the Jedi Council, and thus would probably be in a better position to actually lobby for Ahsoka's side, within the system, which is something he's better at, than Anakin, who just kind of... Now, I do wonder if the propaganda machine did anything with this after, that it was revealed that the Jedi were the ones behind the war and were this evil force and blah, blah, blah. I'm actually really curious. Like, they couldn't even keep their own, and Ahsoka, she tried, but she was killed. I've just always wondered little stuff like that. I wonder if that comes up in Rebels at all. So, there's this funny thing where she trades some food for a cloak. It's funny for two reasons. First of all, I'm amused because, cloaks are just the universal hiding symbol. I've actually made fun of that before in this very franchise. But then the other reason it amuses me is because it doesn't work. She stays hidden for all of 3 minutes before they're like, aha! It really amuses me how hard she goes out of her way to not hurt anyone. And no one notices. You'd think someone would report something other than... we found her and in custody of a bunch of bombs. How about something along the lines of, every time we've encountered her, she's gone out of her way to not harm us. She even flat out told us she didn't want to fight us, sir. None of that's reported, because that's relevant evidence. Even if this was an actual legal case, which it's not, because this is fictional legalese, Ace Attorney style. But even in such a circumstance, you'd think that would be something that would be mentioned, because that is relevant. Even when Ventress joins the thing, she ends up not killing anyone. And, of course, being a total badass while doing it because she's Ventress. Now, I find it ironic because at this point in time, Ventress is one of the very few people who would probably know exactly what Ahsoka's going through right now, and thus could not only help because she is sympathetic, but actually legitimately empathize with everything that Ahsoka is dealing with right now. If anything, it's amusing to me that the thing that convinces Ventress to help Ahsoka is the fact that Ahsoka went ahead and offered the option of putting in a good word for her to try and remove the war crimes thing and basically get her, the price on her head removed so she can move more freely. Interesting food for thought, especially considering what ends up happening over the course of this arc, as I've already mentioned. Now, There's this great quote that Ventress says. I like Ventress as a character too, by the way, if that's not obvious. Another character I never thought I'd like and slowly grew to like over time. She says, "These are truly strange times." And that really does summarize the Clone Wars in a nutshell, doesn't it? The Clone Wars was when basically all of the things that were considered standard accepted norms, all the status quos on an almost galactic scale, kind of got shifted and adjusted to the new order, which I suppose was entirely the point. So then, some mysterious person, who could it possibly be, manages to take down Ventress, which I roll to disbelieve. The effortlessness with which she takes down Ventress and absconds with her gear is silly. And then Ahsoka at no point realizes that's not Ventress, even though it is simply not Ventress's style to not talk during combat. Even back when she was a full-on Sith apprentice of Dooku, that was the norm for her. And yet she, whoever this, sorry, I shouldn't say she, whoever this strange, mysterious person is, clearly is not Ventress. It's actually a little bit insulting that Ahsoka doesn't realize that. And then, not Ventress somehow manages to beat Ahsoka, who at this point isn't holding back at all. Again, I roll to disbelieve. And she doesn't just beat her, she beats her so hard that she specifically leads her exactly where she wanted her to be so that she could be found with the spare explosives. Right. Regardless of my opinions on how ridiculous this all lines up, I've always had a private theory that mysterious person who's really behind it, I'm still trying to maintain the thing, because, we'll find out next episode, for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, or never seen the series. But I've always assumed that the person behind this had help, that there were other more powerful and more manipulative people involved who are trying to push this thing, because otherwise this just doesn't make sense for me, unless she got really, really lucky like 5 times in a row. Or, of course, it could just be bad writing. I don't know. Anyways, I'll see you next time, guys.